Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing Dark Souls Remastered on the GeForce GTX 1060 3GB. For performance monitoring, I'll be using CAM. If you want to download the software, there's a link down in the description. So Dark Souls Remastered, I'll be doing 1080p, 1440p and 4K. To skip none of those sections of the video, check the description below. So while there's not much to say about the performance here, the GTX 1060 can handle the game just fine. Using the G4560 is more than enough to maintain 60 frames per second. This game has a 60 frames per second cap, so the difference between the CPUs is really not noticeable. Since the G4560 is already enough for 60, a better CPU will do the same job, just with less effort doing so. At 1440p and 1080p, just by using the maximum settings, you maintain 60 frames per second all the time. Then at 4K you can do something similar, but lower the anti-aliasing to FXAA and I turn off motion blur. And with that we have some GPU power to spare on Blighttown, but when there are many effects on screen, for example the gargoyle fight, that there's a lot of fire sometimes, it might drop below 60 at 4K to around 50 frames per second. I don't take that as a big deal, but some people might care about that. If you do care about that, just play at 1440p or below and you'll be fine. In the options menu we have very little options. We got vertical sync, anti-aliasing, motion blur, depth of field and ambient occlusion, pretty much. The good thing about this one compared to the prepare to die edition, you can change this in-game, so you don't have to restart the game, go into INI file for this fix. So that's good, we can compare performance very easily. It also supports ultra-wide resolutions, I tested that myself. It's just the original version with some small graphical improvements, plus some optimizations for modern hardware, for saying it some way. So it's capped at 60 frames per second, you cannot go over 60. That's why I enable VSync on all the videos in this game. Since we cannot go over 60, it doesn't make much sense to me to disable VSync. And well, the most demanding options so far, since we have so little, pretty much all of them have some sort of small impact. On my end so far, the most demanding options were anti-aliasing and ambient occlusion. Usually those two are the ones that make the difference. Then in places where you can see very far into the distance, for example Firelink Shrine, depth of field has a bigger impact in performance, but nothing too drastic. Motion blur in this case seems to be camera motion blur, which in my opinion is very annoying. I get kinda dizzy using it. I used it anyway, so you can see how it goes, but it's not a big performance impact, so be aware of that. If you already own this game, I wouldn't really consider rebuying it at 50% off, maybe wait for a deeper sale, but I agree with most people. This should have been a patch for the previous edition, the prepare to die edition. It runs a lot better. So far it has the fixes for the frame rate, so they fixed the physics, they fixed Blighttown, which is wonderful, and they also got rid of the stutter that happened constantly on the previous edition, at least on my end. So yeah, the game runs a lot better, much more stable. So my testing methodology here is going from Blighttown to the Undead Berg, or the other way around, it depends. Sometimes I did the opposite direction. As I said, Blighttown is fixed, so it runs a lot better, but overall the biggest performance hits were when a boss uses a fire effect on you. For example, the gargoyles, those can be a big impact in performance. So if you have a lot of GPU power to spare on Blighttown, for example on Blighttown you get 80% GPU usage or 70%, that's usually enough to deal with the fire effects. For example on my 1050 Ti video, that's the case at 1440p and below, but at 4K and Blighttown I get 99% GPU usage, still 60 frames per second, but once you fight the gargoyles you might get 30 frames per second when fire shows up, so that's something to keep in mind. There's also some minor stutter sometimes when traveling through areas. Not really a big deal if you ask me, it happens to me on Dark Souls 3 as well. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you keep enjoying the video, thanks for watching and see you next time.